Alright, I'm kind of sore and I'm sitting on my floor and there's a grilled cheese right in front of me that I really want to eat. So let's just do this video and ignore that I'm wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Hi, my name is Ella and I love to read. Welcome to 2018 on this channel. So 2017 was a bit of a roller coaster all around, but hopefully 2018 will be a lot better in terms of posting consistent content and talking about a lot more different books with you guys. Even though I didn't share that much of my reading year with you last year, I thought I would still share my favorite and least favorite books of this year. So a lot of people do this video by only choosing one book for each series, but since I don't want to give myself that pain, I'm going to allow myself to put one whole series in a single slot and then tell you what my favorite book of that series was. This will only apply to my favorite books because all my least favorite books were just either single books in a series or just single books in general. I didn't passionately hate any whole series this year. All these books were not released specifically in 2017, but I did read them in 2017, so I'm gonna put them on the list. Okay, I think we're gonna start with my least favorite books, my worst books of 2017. There's only 4 of them that made the list. And this is just a reminder that all these things that I say are just my personal opinion, and if I hate your favorite book, I'm sorry, but we all have different opinions. So please don't bash me, I'm sorry. This is just how I feel, and if you don't want to watch how I feel, then you can leave. But if you want to be respectful about my opinions, why don't you leave your opinions in the comments so we can have a nice, appropriate discussion about how we feel about all these different books. Alright, so let's get started. So out of the books that were my worst books of 2017, I only have one that I still own. Number 4 on this list is A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. So a lot of people actually had this on their favorites list, but I was very in disagreement with those people. I was very excited for this book, especially because after ACOWAR and such a good second book in this series, I really wanted to continue in that world, but this one was a really big disappointment and I really didn't like what I read in this one. So if you haven't been on BookTube before, this is the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. It follows a human girl named Feyre living in a fantasy world right below the line of Prythian, the fairy world. In the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, she ends up on the other side of the line and she ends up having to figure out living with fairies and all the new relationships and new fae that she discovers. The first book was okay, the second book I really liked, but this one was just, I didn't like it at all. Especially as I think about it more, it just makes me angrier and angrier. This next part is going to be a lot spoilery, so if you haven't read this and you want to read this and you don't want to be spoiled, I would suggest you skip ahead until I put this book down. Alright, so the things I didn't like about this book, pretty much all of it had to do with the representation. When an author tries to make their books diverse, they can do it one way or they can do it another way. The first way is to respectfully integrate well-researched diversity into your works that will not make people angry. The second way is to try and pack in all diversity possible in the last book of a series because you desperately need those readers to buy more books because they think you're problematic. Guess which way this book was? I had a lot of problems with the diverse representation in this book, namely the LGBT representation. There's 2 characters who are represented as LGBT in this book specifically that I want to talk about. That's Hellion, the Lord of the Day Court. I think it's the Day Court. And also Morgan or Moore, who we met in the last book. The problems that I had with these representations were very big problems, especially with Hellion. The promiscuous bisexual representation, I was not down for. I really hate when people communicate that trope, that all bisexual people like to have sex with a lot of people and at the same time with different genders. This trope is especially harming, and I did not like the only bisexual representation. Out of all of the healthy representations of queer people, she chose to make one of the only characters a promiscuous bisexual man. And while his identity is still valid and I don't want to hate on his identity, this was very harmful, especially in a book that so many people read. I also did not like the coming out scene with Moore and Feyre. I felt like it was unnatural and forced, very forced, and she didn't come out for the right reasons, which is very unhealthy to communicate to people. Other things that I was just disappointed with, there wasn't as much as a group dynamic as with ACOWAR. There was only one scene where everyone was hanging out together like they had in the previous book, and it didn't make me happy or feel the same things that I did in the last book at all. I also thought that the ending to this book was very oh, this is really how you want to end this whole series with all the messages that you packed in here. This is how you want to end it, because literally the last scene, what she wants to tell people, what she wants people to hang on to, is people flying around in lingerie over a city. What the heck? And I'm not really sure that I want to continue with this series after this. Overall, I was very disappointed with this book and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Number 3 on my list of books that I didn't like was Variant by Robinson Wells. So I got rid of this book. I just thought it was overall really disappointing and it wasn't what I was expecting. It's kind of marketed as a dystopian kind of feel, and at the time I was really excited about it, but it was just really disappointing and I didn't like the characters at all. They were really bland The setting wasn't unique, and it just didn't have anything working for it. I don't have as much to say about this one because I read it and I was like, oh, that was bad, and then I was like, forgot everything about it. So overall, I gave this book a 1 out of 5. My second one on my list is Caraval by Stephanie Garber, another controversial one. I didn't feel any connection to the characters. I don't even remember their names besides the 2 sisters. I thought the setting was very hard to follow and confusing, and while that could have been a good element to the story, the ending didn't really draw it together at all and help me understand what had happened. I know a lot of people are excited for the sequel because we get to follow the other sister, but honestly, she wasn't portrayed in a very good way in the first book, so I don't think I'm going to continue with this series at all. It was just very badly executed through confusing and bland writing, undeveloped setting, and unconnectable characters. If you want to see like a good criticism of this book, Joss over at Squibblesreads has a really good video like exposing like the crappy writing, and I had a really great time watching that video because it's hilarious. Okay, let's move through. So the last book that I had on this list was A Shadow Bright and Burning by Jessica Cluess. I had a bunch of the same problems that I had with Caraval with this book. The world was very underdeveloped, and throughout the whole book, the sense of setting that I had wasn't very interesting, and I didn't want to inhabit that world at all. The characters were terrible. I couldn't relate to Henrietta at all. She had no defining personality traits to me, and all the other characters felt very tropish and shallow, and I really felt that they didn't move the story forward in a way that could have made it a really good character-driven story. While I was reading it, I was so bored, and I just wanted to get through it really quickly. I really don't understand how anyone could like it, because like the drama is so two-dimensional, and it doesn't carry the story forward at all. I also had trouble with like the relationships in this book. I don't even remember the characters' names, but there were like 2 or 3 love interests, and I really didn't find their connections with the main character Henrietta very nice at all. And like the whole mystery element of this book, it's just, oh, it's so cringy. I just didn't like it. I would not recommend this book. Let's just move on to my favorite books, because those are what I'm more excited to talk about. Okay, so as I said before, I did include series on this list, but I will tell you which out of the book was my favorite book in the series. So I have 7 books on this list that I had the most fun reading, that made the most impact on me, or that I reread multiple times because I just really liked them. At spot number 7 on my favorites of 2017, we have The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I thought about for a while if I would include this book, because there really were a couple stories that I didn't really click with and that I didn't really like. But in the end, the poetic style of this book and the imagery connecting along with the illustrations really made this a solid book for me. And it was Leigh Bardugo, so like, this is a connection to Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse, where she shares with us 5 fairy tales from a bunch of different places in the Grishaverse. I really like that this book follows strong female protagonists, especially strong female protagonists of color. The stories just felt so magical and whimsical, like real fairy tales. I would definitely recommend this book because it expands the Grishaverse so much. If you haven't even started on your Leigh Bardugo, what are you doing? Get on it! Like, this is so good, especially with all the other books Alright, number 6 on this list is what currently exists of the Witchlands series by Susan Dennard. The first book is Truth Witch, and the second book is Wind Witch. My favorite one out of these 2 was definitely Truth Witch. I had a lot more fun reading this book since the characters were all together. It just made me laugh out loud. Literally in class I was reading and I would have to be laughing and like the feels all the time while reading this one. I really love this beginning to the series. I'm so glad that I discovered this series in 2017. It's a high fantasy series taking place in the Witchlands, following a bunch of characters from all the different countries, and all of them have magical powers called witchery, of which they have a specific kind. So our main character, Sophia, is a truth witch, so she can tell if people are lying. This has a lot of action, and it really explores the world and the lore of the world, and I'm also really excited for the prequel novel, Sight Witch, that's coming out in 2018. I would highly recommend it if you like political fantasies and character-driven stories. Alright, number 5 on this list snuck out of nowhere, and that is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I'm also glad I have my own copy of this because it's so big and beautiful. I wasn't even gonna pick this up on release day. Like, I knew it was coming out, but I was like, oh look, it's a Marissa Meyer, I'll get it eventually, whatever. But then I saw it at the library and I got it and I read it and oh my god, this is so good. It's like the perfect length, and it gives you so much time to like explore the world and learn about all your characters. Renegades follows a post-Civil War kind of dystopian city where there are 2 main groups, the Renegades and the Anarchists, along with a bunch of other insurgent groups. And most of these groups are composed of prodigies, people who have superpowers. So our main character from the Renegade side, Adrian, he's called Sketch, and whatever he draws, he could like bring to 3D and bring to real life. Our main character on the anarchist side, Nova, she can both put people to sleep and she never sleeps. I really love this book for the way that it compared the Renegades and the anarchist side. Nova is a young anarchist out of a group who is mostly old anarchists, and we follow Adrian and his team of young renegades, and she tries to infiltrate the Renegades. So she infiltrates the Renegades with a secret alias Insomnia while they're trying to find her as Nightmare. I thought it was a great step up from Marissa Meyer's other works, and I can definitely see her growing as a writer, literally, and in terms of the worlds she creates. I'm so excited for the next book in 2018. I read all of Cassie Clare this year. I literally read from City of Bones all the way to The Dark Artifices. That's right, number 4 on my list is The Dark Artifices, which is Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. So if you haven't read these, I can't really tell you lots about them because it would really spoil a bunch of what has happened in the other series. Shadowhunters, you've heard of it. These are good. My favorite one is probably Lady Midnight. I read this one twice. I read it once before I read Lord of Shadows, and then I read it again on audiobook like a month ago. But I really love this series. The characters make me feel so many things. Setting at the LA Institute is just so vivid. Emma and Julian are my children. These are so big I can barely hold them in one hand. If you haven't caught up on all your Shadowhunters, I would definitely recommend you do that, just so you can get to these books, because these books are my favorite out of all of them. We're finally almost to the end. We have my top 3 favorite books in series that I read in 2017. Number 3 is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. What the heck? I know. This little book, like, since I first heard about it, I was like, I'm gonna read that. That's amazing. I'm gonna read it. Day it came out, I picked it up. I think I read it over 2 sittings. It's really short, but I love it so much. I read it twice and once on audiobook in the car, and it just has such an impact on my heart. I just really love this story. The characters make me cry, and I can't talk about this book enough. So Dear Martin follows a black high school senior named Justice who goes to a predominantly white prep school and is headed to Yale next fall when he starts being on the receiving end of police brutality that is only heard about in the news. So through this book, we follow him as he goes on an experiment to be more like Dr. Martin Luther King when he writes letters to him, hence the title Dear Martin. I think this book is really important in the way that it portrays the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's telling a much needed story. I really connected with this book and the way that it taught me a lesson about my own privilege and the way that I live my life, and I'm just really glad that I got to read it, and I know it's going to be my favorite for a really long time. Literally, go read this. If there's only one book that you pick up from all of these, I really need you to go read this book right now because I love it with all of my heart. Number 2, it's The Six of Crows Duology by Leigh Bardugo. It's another 2 that I read twice this year, and I've read parts of Crooked Kingdom over and over again since I read it the second time. So out of the 2, Crooked Kingdom is definitely my favorite one. I really love this book. Six of Crows is a story about a fantasy city called Ketterdam, where we have all people from different backgrounds and different countries coming together to pull off a grand heist. I don't want to tell you a lot about it because I personally think you should go into it knowing not a lot. The writing is beautiful, the characters are amazing, the diversity is beautiful, the world building, so good. The hype is real, people. The hype is real. And then last on my list, if you didn't guess it, it's A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. So we have A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and The Conjuring of Light. My favorite book out of the series is probably A Gathering of Shadows. I had so much fun reading this book. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me feel all the emotions, and whenever I remember reading this book, I just remember having the greatest time ever. I'm very glad that I discovered this series this year because these characters as well have cemented a place in my heart. Can't wait to read all the rest of the V.E. Schwab books in 2018, besides those that I've already read. This is a high fantasy series that kind of bridges between adult and YA. We follow magicians called Anatari as they travel between different versions of London that are all categorized by color. I love this series so much, I'll definitely scream about it on any day of the week. I think that's it for my favorite and least favorite books of 2017. Let me know if you agreed with me in the comments, or if you disagreed, what your other favorite books were. I'm really glad that I got to read all these books this year, and then I get to share them with you. Looking back on 2017, it was a great reading year for me. I discovered so many new favorites, so many good series. I can't wait for 2018, and I can't wait for all the new things that are coming out and all the old favorites that I'll get to return to. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great time reading. Until I see you next time. Bye!